go out into the hallway and answer it, and you can come back in. We have our sign-up sheet already out, and if anyone comes in now, they will not be able to speak. We've got one that signed up. So, having said that, we're going to ask for permission, Vice Chairman Simmons, to stand up, lead some invocation, and the pledge of allegiance.
Everybody now from this week. Dear Lord, we'd like to thank you for this day. Thank you to be able to wake up to see another day. And Lord, in this time of uncertainty, don't know what's going to happen, we want to still pray to you, because we know that you can help us. We know that everything is in your hands. And dear Lord, those who are first responders in this county, in every county, who get up every morning and go to work knowing that their lives could be in danger. Dear Lord, we want to thank them and ask that you put your arm of protection around them. Those who are overseas also, Lord, fighting it. We should meet and discuss the problems and figure out what we need to do for them in this county. Dear Lord, we know not how this is going to end, but we do pray that we know that you'll handle it. You know that in due time you will make things all right, dear Lord. Dear Lord, we like to just continue to thank you and praise you, because we know you know what's best for us and you know what you are doing. These things we ask in your name, and ask for your blessings. Amen.
We pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. I'm going to now ask for Ms. Gaines to call the roll of the commissioners, please.
I, Olympia Gaines, President and Clerk of the Board of Commissioners of Bullitt County, hereby call the roll for those on the governing body and official staff. All those present answer by saying aye. Chairman Ward Thompson.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Anthony Simmons.
Aye.
Commissioner Ray Mosley.
Aye.
Commissioner Jackie Stringer.
Aye.
Commissioner Kurt Deal.
Aye.
Commissioner Timmy Rushing.
Aye.
Commissioner Walter Gibson.
Aye.
I have determined that we have all members of the Board of Commissioners present. Therefore, we have a quorum to conduct business for the good of the citizens of Bullitt County. I now yield the floor to the chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gaines. Going to ask you to do something. If the commissioners, I've been guilty of this already, if you will sort of slide forward, make certain your mics are on, pull them up to you so that people can hear, because we are videoing this tonight. Thank you very much. Before I entertain a motion to approve the general agenda, do we have any other discussion or modifications desired by the county manager or the board?
Yes, sir. In fact, I don't believe we have any of this evening from the staff of the county manager.
Thank you very much. Next, we're moving into public comments, and at this time, yes, I need a motion to approve the general agenda.
So moved.
Second. Motion and second. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous approval. Now, moving into public comments. At this time, I will recognize those citizens that have something that's on their mind that they would like to address with this commission board, and if you will, direct your comments directly to this commission board. And we have Mr. Jones here tonight who's going to speak on behalf of the residents of Cowboy Way. If you'll step up to the podium and speak into the mic, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Sidney Jones. I've been on Cowboy Way for about 11 years, 5 years on one property. I couldn't pay for it, so I moved out and moved up the street. And I just paid for my other property I didn't pay for in March. Thank God. And when I came here the first time, I had kidney failure. With the add to that, I've had heart surgery and intestines rupturing. Praise God, I'm standing here today, and I'm a miracle. Everything is healed up. I'm walking. I get up and I thank God every day. Right now, I'm here today trying to get the speed bumps put down on Cowboy Way. And we talked about this last time, and I've got to get a few more signatures, but I misplaced my forms that I had when I was down, and I came here to get the copies that I give to Mr. Brad. And to add to that, we'd like to see the lines painted back on the roads, because you can't see none of them. And if we could get a couple of street lights. It's totally dark out there, and people walking at night, you know, for exercise and what have you. Kids playing, animals cross the road. In fact, I done had 2 little puppies get killed because of people going too fast on the road. It's 15, and they do 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. And it's unacceptable. People stand in their yards, slow down, slow down. And then they get in arguments, fights, and they shouldn't be that way. And so I think the only other option would be to put speed bumps down, because when you call the law, they off in a far distance, and by the time they get there, the offender is done gone. So if we could move to make that happen, that'd be very much appreciated. I was supposed to have some other residents here, but they said they're coming. So I'm speaking on the ones that's not here, and hopefully we can get those actions taken care of. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming and speaking. And County Manager, Mr. Tom Kelch, would you like to address any of the issues he talked about and the procedures that they need to go through to accomplish those requests?
Well, I think after talking to Mr. Deal, the county engineer, I think Mr. Deal has apprised Mr. Jones of the process and the potential costs which would, under our roads and bridges policies, as you may recall, require something on the order of a special district, just like you have with the street lights. I haven't been to Cowboy Way in some time, nor have I seen any maps of proposed neighborhood with regard to either the speed bumps, tables, whatever needs to be put in, or street lights. If it's relatively simple, it just calls for a couple of lights, we might be able to dispense that without a streetlight tax district. And of course, the vertical deflection devices or the speed bumps would require something on the tax bill. But according to Mr. Deal, it sounds like according to his calculations, it's going to be modest. But I think once Mr. Jones and his folks get, I believe the standards, 80% of the affected neighbors or neighborhood to sign the petition, we can proceed with doing a speed study, which merely involves putting out some devices to determine how fast people are really going, maybe leave them out for, a week or so, or however long Mr. Deal sees fit. And then we can determine the right kind of devices, signage, so on and so forth. So the process sounds complicated, it really isn't. It just takes a little bit of time to develop, just like with the streetlights in a normal streetlight tax district. But I've been assured by Mr. Deal that Mr. Jones and the preponderance of the neighbors are aware of it. So with that, I'll yield the floor back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We certainly appreciate you coming tonight and speaking, and you're certainly welcome to stay now for the rest of the program, or if you desire to leave now, this would be the good time to do it.
Right.
And, so, we're gonna move on now with our consent agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. It's approval of the minutes of April 21, Highland BHCC, the lease renewal. That's at 11 North College Street, an intergovernmental agreement with the county capacity for the correctional institute. We can vote on these collectively, or if you would like to move one under new business, we can certainly do so.
Chairman, I move that we approve the consent agenda. I think we can do all 3 of them together.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion, show of hands. Unanimous approval. Thank you very much. And now we will move into our new business. And we have 4 items under new business. And the first one is authorization to send notice of non-renewal to MedCom for cafeteria plan administration services. Ms. Mellon, you will address that?
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to. Good evening, everyone. Actually, the next 3 items on the agenda are all mine, and they are all interrelated. So if you would allow me, I'll just give a brief introduction that really applies to all 3 of them. For quite some time, the county has had a cafeteria plan that is part of the benefits program for employees. That cafeteria plan allows employees to dedicate pre-tax dollars toward certain benefits in our cafeteria plan. Those benefits include the flexible spending account plans for employees. It's a pretty standard benefit, and the county very generously allows employees to participate in it. Since 2015, that cafeteria plan and the flexible spending arrangement itself have been managed or administered by an organization called MedCom out of Florida. And although MedCom has done a good job for us, we've had some issues lately with regard to customer service, which led us to look at potential other options this year. After a review of the options and in fully vetting opportunities to maybe make a change at this point, the staff is recommending that we actually change the administration of the flexible spending account and the cafeteria plan to another organization called Swerdlin and Company. That organization is out of Atlanta. They've got many years of experience in administering these type of plans. We have vetted them fully, in addition to checking references, meeting with them, looking at their work product. We've also consulted with some of our other benefits vendors who have some experience with this organization as well. So all of that being said, staff is recommending that we make a change. In order to make that change, it requires a number of things. One, and the first item on the agenda, is that we need to notify our current vendor of our intent to non-renew our contract. That has to be done 30 days, at least 30 days prior to the renewal. And because that contract is something that you all approved, I'm just asking your authorization for us to notify MedCom that we don't intend to renew the contract. The second item then would be to, assuming that you agree to all of these, the second item would be to, for you to authorize us to enter into the agreements with Swerdlin and Company that would allow them to become the administrator of those plans. There are 2 separate agreements. The first is an administrative services agreement that just outlines the terms and the cost proposal. The second is a business associate agreement, which is required under HIPAA for us to have this agreement with this particular vendor. In terms of cost, there is a slight increase in cost over what we've been paying previously. The total would depend on how many people enroll, how many employees enroll in the program. But if the enrollment numbers remain constant, the cost to change is going to be right around $1,000. So, it's not an insignificant cost, but it's not a large cost to make this change. That we do believe Swerdlin has the expertise and the availability to address some of the issues that we've had and to make some improvements in customer service and administrative support. And then finally, the last of the 3 items on the agenda would be asking you all to adopt a restated cafeteria plan. That plan itself has to be administered in accordance with a written plan document. The new organization has drafted, in anticipation of us hopefully being able to make this change, a restated plan document that incorporates recent changes in federal law. Some of you may be aware that the CARES Act actually allowed additional items to be purchased under flexible spending arrangements, and so that is incorporated in this new plan document. That would have to be adopted by you all. In addition, there's an adoption agreement that authorizes the document, and then finally, a summary plan description, which we're required to provide to employees, that just describes to employees and summarizes for them the terms of the plan. So I know I just said a lot. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have. But assuming you all are comfortable with us making this change, then all 3 of those motions, we would approve that you actually take action on all 3 items in order to effect this change. And by the way, the documents have all been reviewed, of course, by staff, including the county attorney. We feel like the documents are in order and don't have any concerns about moving forward.
Do you have any questions? All right, hearing none, and we're going to have to vote on each one of these individually. So there'll be 3 items, and the first one is authorization to send notice of non-renewal to Medcom for cafeteria plan administration services.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make that motion that we move forward with that.
Second.
Motion second, any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion. We have the motion second, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, show of hands. Unanimous approval. Thank you. Second is the administrative service and business associate agreements with Swerland and Company. Do we have any questions? Item number 2.
I make a motion we approve item number 2. Swerland and Company.
Second.
Have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Not, all those in favor of the motion, show of hands. Unanimous approval. And third is the adoption of the restated cafeteria plan and associated documents.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept item number 3.
Second.
Have a motion with a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, show of hands. Unanimous. You approve? Unanimous approval.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 4 is ambulance purchase by EMS, and Mr. Vickers will present this.
Doug Vickers, Director of EMS. Earlier in the year, we sent out requests for RFPs for a new ambulance. I was approved to spend up to $200,000 for this particular unit. On April 1st, myself and Pay Bragg opened up the RFPs. We had 4 responses. Only 1 response didn't deviate from the standard requirements that we lined out. That was Custom Truck and Body Works. Their bid's around $192,000. It mimics the trucks that we have. For 7 years, they provided our ambulances. This going with their bid would provide us to have identical trucks, staffed and stocked, about full-time and part-time. We have a lot of people part-time that don't work that often. So having the same truck to get it through all the time would help a whole lot with that. They prove that they service our trucks. They come here. They're located in West Georgia. They're the only builder manufacturer in Georgia. product stands up. One of our trucks is up to 7 years old now. It's held up well. It's still front of my truck. They are not below bid. They're $4,000 from off of being below bid. Nonetheless, they approved themselves for the service. The one that is low bid is a stock truck. They don't have the same cabinets that we've asked for, such as for the Lucas device, to fit into it without an issue. Unless there's further questions, our request is that we go to custom trucks and Body Works once again for the purchase of new animals.
Thank you for the presentation. Do we have any questions or comments to make?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this purchase of an ambulance from Custom Truck and Body Works.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion, show of hands. Motion carried. In order of the truck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's that time of year again. It's budget briefing time, so we got to call on our county manager to share all the good news with us.
Sorry, I have to be able to see the screen while I talk. Okay, we felt like it was important, albeit it was a little bit late on the agenda, but we felt it was important to give you all a fiscal year 2021 budget briefing. And I have to be honest, because of COVID-19, it's not going to be pretty. And what we're going to do primarily is focus on the general fund. I may touch on a few of the other major funds, but obviously the general fund is our primary fund for operations. And that, of course, is where the property taxes are funneled through on the revenue side. So we'll just go ahead and get started. I'll try to keep this under 20 minutes. There may be a few things that appear to be a little bit redundant, but if they are, it's simply because I'm trying to reinforce what our situation is and how we have to look at it. So please bear with me on that. Okay, the process thus far, pretty standard up until all of the executive orders and states of emergencies went into place. We actually got started a little bit early than we normally do in February. We issued a budget requests from all of the internal departments. I think we got a very good head start on our CIP, or Capital Improvements Program, which for the benefit of the audience, we primarily fund our capital improvements and purchases through SPLOST and T-SPLOST, unless there's smaller purchases that can be included in the operating budget. We were on the precipice, before all the closures and orders and so forth, the state of emergency, to reach out to external agencies, and those are folks like the Health Department, Island Mental Health, Development Authority, a litany of others. But we held back on that because a lot of these kinds of departments or agencies, we either co-fund in some way with the state of Georgia, and as you recall, before the Georgia General Assembly ceased or suspended their operations because of COVID-19, I think they approved an amended 2020 budget, and we're working on 2021. And you may recall at that time, even preceding that, Governor Kemp had asked for some more modest budget cuts. You probably read more recently that they're higher now because of COVID-19. But we typically try to time the requests and packages we try to get from these state-funded or co-funded external agencies, we want to wait and see what the state budget is going to look like. Because sometimes when the state budget or the state cuts some of these budgets, naturally they come asking the county to make it up. And then, of course, COVID-19 happened, or it not just happened, it accelerated. And therefore, over the past 2 weeks, we've been fervently trying to create some budget revisions and some scenarios, primarily on the revenue side, which I'm going to try to explain. And of course, you all have this on your paper handouts, and I'm sorry for the printer quality. I think we need to put some color toner in some of the cartridges. But the difficulties are unknown, and the numbers aren't friendly. And we can't predict or model exact outcomes due to lagging economic data, which I'm going to demonstrate. But if you put it into a capsule, when COVID-19 emerged in the United States, and I'll have some examples of this on a subsequent page, a lot of economic data that you get, there's that lag time where, it's reported a month behind. And so a lot of the latest data that's available right now is only through the end of March, and it's May 1st already, and we probably won't see April numbers. Maybe on the national level you might see some in the coming days, but at the state level, it may be days or weeks. So this is just an example of the national data, and I won't go through everything because if you've been halfway awake and watching the news or reading about the news, you can see with all of these different indicators, whether it's employment data, personal income, inflation, manufacturing and durable goods, construction, nationwide, it's all down, and in a lot of ways, very, very significantly. And I'll talk about unemployment rates in a minute, but when you see, and you've heard recently, 30 million claims nationwide, that's ugly. We have a population of, I think, 330 million people in this country, and probably 60 to 65% of those folks are in the workforce, whether they're employed or unemployed, but many more appear to be unemployed, either on a temporary or perhaps permanent basis. And then the first quarter GDP numbers came out. We won't see those early preliminary numbers again until July, I think. GDP dropped nationwide 4.8%, and they're talking all kinds of double digits. I don't know if they can really predict it. I've heard dire things like 30 or 40%, and then I've heard, maybe 15, 16. But either way, when you're used in a normal economic cycle, the GDP going up generally 2 or 3%, that's a pretty drastic drop. And the GDP is just the output of all the production and the workers and everything like that nationwide. We all know a lot of things halted, particularly in the tourism and hospitality industry, and then it just reverberated through the entire economy. Now, if we bring it down to our level, we don't have a lot of local data yet. We like to include building permits and stuff, although the building permits are kind of skewed right now at the local, state, and national level because there's a lot of construction backlog going on. But I think if we begin to look forward, that's going to taper off, because when you think about it, like here in Bullitt County, I think, Andy, did you say, was it last month we had 33 single-family permits? Right. That's a lot of single-family permits, and if you're the construction industry cheerleader, you're probably thinking, yeah, go, yeah, that's great. But a lot of these we know are spec houses, and if all of these other economic indicators are going bad, or people happen to be losing their jobs, which isn't good, who's going to buy them? Or if we don't have any new population growth, who's going to buy those homes? But very quickly, if you look and compare these numbers, especially unemployment or unemployment, proportionately, locally, we're worse off than the rest rest of the state, and not necessarily county to county or peer counties, but the state as a whole. You know, our unemployment rate shot up much faster. 5.3% looks a lot better than what it was at the peak of recession 10 years ago, but it shot up fast. But if you look at the percentage of the increase in 1 month over unemployment claims, you know, 2,100%, which is approximately 21 or 2,200 workers in Bullitt County filed for unemployment claims, and that represents a good portion of the third, or a pretty significant portion, because our employed workforce the preceding month was about 33 or 34,000 workers. So, you know, that's a significant jump. So I think in April, when we get the numbers in a few weeks, on both sides of the court, the numbers are going to look much worse. I would say much closer to perhaps 10%, but it could be more, could be less, don't know. Interesting thing is sales taxes on a statewide basis, they're down 2.4%. That was for March. We don't have April yet. With the shutdowns and shelter in place and everything, that could be worse. Interestingly, we don't know why, our SPLOST shot up 1.2%, but our T-SPLOST dropped 2.2%. But we feel like the April numbers could be worse, just like with the national economy. Now, there's other factors that affect the economy and budgeting. I don't think we're going to fare that well in state or federal aid opportunities. We may get some FEMA money back, but it won't be like the occurrence when we had the hurricanes with that big, I think it was well over $1 million, right, Andy? I don't think we're going to see that, because we can only count emergency protective measures, this is what they call it, basically, you know, public health and public safety. And even with public safety, they only count overtime, where if you've got public works involved, and I forget the exact category, it's of measures for that, but we were able to claim 100% plus fringe benefits of the wages and salaries. And then we haven't heard, or it doesn't look promising, that there's going to be any stimulus funds for state and local government. There's a small pot that's gone to the state of Georgia of $4.1 billion, and I think I've expressed this in a previous email. Local governments are eligible, if the state chooses, to get up to 45% of that. I don't think we'll get any, because if Georgia got $4.1 billion, and they figure their budget shortage to be in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution to be $4 billion, don't count on it for local government. If we do get something, it'll probably be peanuts, and it'll probably be COVID-19 related, but it might be a good offset with the FEMA funds. Then there's a state budget, like I said before. If you remember, if you were here as a commissioner when the Great Recession was here, they either did things that reduced our revenue, or they shifted costs over to counties and even cities, although very few cities operate differently. And like I said, they're calling for 14% across the board cuts. Nothing will be spared. And so what this means is there's an immediate economic impact on our revenues, and we would expect locally a slower economic recovery. And depending upon how the community complies with state and federal guidelines for phased reopening, that may have some kind of influence on how the economy will recover, whether it's better or worse, depending upon if the spike occurs. And a spike could occur if they don't find a vaccine or a cure or some other kind of intervention, because it'll probably be seasonal, because if I remember right, and I'm not a medical expert, but it's a SARS-type virus. And just a couple other factors, you know, education is big here. Georgia Southern, OTC, Bullitt County schools, and the common question is, when will they reopen and how? You know, and what is that going to affect as far as our revenues are concerned? Well, it depends on the way they do it. You probably read or heard that Georgia Southern intends to reopen in the fall and receive in-person students. But we already know that their enrollment is dropping, and we don't exactly know how many students will come back to campus or off campus if that's where they live. And that'll affect the broader economy, but when you look at the school system, we're very intertwined with things like that affect significant revenues, particularly school resource officers at the Sheriff's Department and recreation, whether it's after school or just normal recreational programming. So those are factors as well. So as we finish 2020, what we projected is we're going to have a $2 million budget deficit this year. We were on track where we think that maybe, had it not been for COVID-19, we would have finished approximately even. Either dead even, a little bit more, a little bit less. But we were tracking where it seemed to be possible that we may not have a budget deficit. But then, as you see in the red, we've got some serious expenditure issues. The Sheriff's Department is expected to overspend their budget in the general fund by $1 million. We've got the additional COVID-19 costs, some of which will be returned by FEMA or a little bit in elections from the Secretary of State. Now, we might get some modest offsets from the suspension of recreation programming and where we had to send home the solid waste attendants because, as you recall, many of them are elderly and fit the stay-at-home order of the governor still yet. And we didn't want to put them in any danger because we know there's contaminants on waste and recycling, and we've suspended the recycling simply because nobody will take it right now. Nobody. Again, the revenues will be lower, some of which I mentioned, recreation with their suspended programming, no SR revenues because the school is closed. We'll get hit by fines and forfeitures, and I'm sure there's a lot of other different areas that we don't have to do on a blow-by-blow description. Now, when we make some assumptions about the budget, and again, this will kind of mimic an email that I sent you, but I think it bears repeating for yourselves and the public. We developed our current scenarios assuming that we were going to operate under normal circumstances without COVID-19, just like things were rocking along before February. But in this scenario, we haven't included such things as compensation adjustments for employees, except that, the constitutional officers, it's been mandated that they're going to get, I think, an automatic 5% raise. A couple of them, if they're reelected, may get longevity increases. That was the result of a compensation bill that the General Assembly passed, I think, last year. Certain inelastic sources, and when I talk about inelastic sources, that's consumer-based revenue. It's based on demand for the services. But, no, I'm sorry, I take that back. That's elastic. Inelastic revenues are static revenues, like the property taxes and the insurance premium tax. This year, we don't expect to see any decline because of the way the tax assessor has done business. A lot of the information's in about personal property and real property. So I don't think that would change for the next fiscal year, but there is a prospect that it could go down depending upon how bad the economy is in fiscal 22. Another assumption is we expect that the sheriff will overspend their budget at the same rate. Another assumption is that recreation will be at 50% revenue capacity, which currently or roughly they ought to be at 50% of expenditure capacity, but we still have to measure that. And the current expenditure budget in our expenditure scenario right now, if we don't change anything the way we were doing it like we always have, would be $43.1 million, where I think we're at, this year's budget was roughly 42. All right, these are these revenue scenarios. Now, I'm just gonna click right here real fast. And I know these are hard to read on your handouts, but hopefully you can see them on the screen, but this is more of a graphic representation of what I'm going to explain. We made assumptions that when you back out the insurance premium tax and the property taxes and all the other revenues, and maybe the 50% thing with recreation, but there will either be a 5% reduction, and the only way the 5% reduction is going to occur in those revenues is that if come June, the economy just fully recovers. That's the least likely scenario. 10% is what we call a small V-shaped curve. And that assumes that the recovery will be a little bit slower. It may take several months or the whole year. And we may have to do what I call moderate expenditure countermeasures that I'll explain in a minute. 15% reduction is more likely. And that's the W-shaped recovery down there in the lower left-hand corner. And with that W-shaped recovery, we make the assumption that there's going to be a spike again in COVID-19 cases or other morbidities caused by it. And in that scenario, which we think is the most likely scenario, based on the information that we have today from the scientific and medical experts, that we will have to engage in stronger expenditure countermeasures. And finally, the big daddy of them all is the 20% reduction, which is still plausible. And that kind of recovery is longer term, and then we have to take more severe expenditure countermeasures. And again, that's just a graphic example. And I can send you a copy of this electronically, so hopefully you can see it better on a computer screen at your personal leisure, but this isn't a leisurely exercise. So what's the result? Well, this is a representation of what your general fund deficits are going to look like against each scenario of 5%, 10%, 15%, and 20% based on a $43 million budget. And as you can see, that will range from, getting older. Next year's budget deficit at the lowest level could go from $4.93 million to $6.47 million. That's pretty significant. And the real impact comes into cash flow because we can't forget about this year's projected $2 million deficit. That's where it gets really ugly. So, our financial condition is going to suffer. At the end of fiscal 19, we had a fund balance in the general fund of just under $10 million. Well, as you can see from this slide, depending upon which scenario, and that scenario on the 20% is the worst, where it could go as low as $2 million or less. That's pretty ugly, and that's based on that deficit line that slopes up to the right. So, narratively, the impacts, what it means is, unless that quick V recovery occurs and we operate the same way without any expenditure countermeasures, revenues will fall between 11 to 15% in the general fund next fiscal year. Our fund balance ratio is already going to drop to about 20%. 25 is ideal, and we've held that for a couple of years. Although I think, Andy, you see I may have misrepresented it some.
Maybe a couple points up, maybe 1 or 2. 21 maybe.
21 or 22? Okay. Which isn't awful, but it doesn't consider next year. But still yet, we're going to lose based on the scenarios, between $7 and $8.5 million in fund balance between this year and next year potentially. The fund balance ratio at the end of next year could drop below 10%, which means in fiscal 22, the following year, we would certainly have to take out what I call a payday loan or a tax anticipation note, meaning we won't have enough cash flow in the first quarter of fiscal 22 or the early second quarter of fiscal 22, we'll have to borrow a note based on the amount of cash we need until property taxes come in December. And that's not, we were able to avoid that in the recession because, you know, the big difference is, like I said early on, this isn't a slow burn like the Great Recession. It's an immediate impact, and we don't know how the economy will recover based on the alphabet soup that I gave you before. Now, some of the other funds, like E911, airport, rural fire, we shouldn't see any significant impact next year. And with 911, you may see a little bit on the prepaid wireless fees, but it isn't that much money to be significant. And people are dependent on their cell phones, so in the worst circumstance, they may go without food. They may go without driving a car, but they're going to hang on to that cell phone. And maybe I'm being a little facetious. But we assume that SPLOST and T-SPLOST revenue, although it'll probably be a bigger drop at first, and it depends how business reopens, you know, modestly we're predicting 10%. But again, and this is for the whole year, but again, we really don't know. You know, in previous years, we built in a little recession cushion, but we've kind of relaxed it over the last fiscal year, because that's a good way to put it, Andy. So we don't really have that. We had about a 10% cushion, I think, but we've relaxed it a little bit. So that means we may have to move some things around or defer some projects or purchases. But we're going to re-examine that over the next couple of weeks. Then again, like I said earlier, think about fiscal 22, not next year, but the year after. If this thing has a longer burn on a positive or a negative economic recovery, then what's going to happen to the tax digest by the time we get to fiscal 22? It could drop. I don't think it will be the result of real property or real estate. I think it'll be the result of personal property and the way that they assess the personal property in businesses. If businesses go out of business, you don't have that personal property inventory anymore, or you have lower inventory. And then another dilemma we got to think about, and it's on the recreation side, are we going to reopen Splash? I think we've got a little bit of a plan A, B, and C going on, but social distancing, if it's still firm and in place, is going to be a big headache to manage. We don't know that we will do concessions. We're trying to hit, and I regret, Andy, I didn't introduce that chart that you had, but I think we are trying to make projections based on, if you take your usual amount of attendance, which is 150,000 during the summer, we're trying to project revenues and expenditure at the, what percentages? 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way up to 100%. I don't think we'll get 100 because we won't be able to open up. But the big thing we got to do is make that payment in the enterprise fund. And the ag arena, no pun intended, that's a little bit of a different animal. In fact, we're seriously considering allowing an event to occur and I think it's just the local Horsemen's Association on May 16th. There wouldn't be any concessions. If they can manage the social distancing, I think it'll be okay. But I'm neither a scientist or a medical doctor. And then Splash maybe could open up, is it as early as June 22nd or July 1st?
I think it was late June.
Yes.
Projected July 1st.
And while I'm thinking about it, the Recreation Department has recommended we put off the fireworks festival on July 4th and move it up to Labor Day, which I think is a good idea. That's a mass crowd, 20,000 people, and I hope you all will be okay with that. But if Labor Day and things are rocking along nice and it's safer to do that, Labor Day is as good a holiday as any, I think. Moving along, I'll try to run through this quicker. Revenue countermeasures are going to be very limited. We know we're not going to raise taxes in an environment like this, or fees, but we can't afford to lower them either. Or that gets us into that illiquidity or insolvency territory. FEMA recovery, Secretary of State recovery, it'll be there, but it'll be modest. It won't make us whole. And then, like I said earlier, stimulus money or sharing of what stimulus money the state got is very unlikely. Now, this is where you really are going to have to begin your focus. But because if we're estimating that 15% reduction in elastic revenues, I think we have to be prepared to give you some options to decide on for expenditure countermeasures. And the biggest bang for the buck is probably going to come on the personnel side. Now there's some things you can do that are light, moderate, severe, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, we're already not planning for compensation adjustments or vacation cash outs. But after we develop these options, it's going to be you pick strawberries, and we will try to attach the best price tag we can with it. But as a matter of policy and the budget resolution, you're going to have to decide which ones that you want to select. And none of it's going to be pain-free, but it's just how deep you want to put the needle into the skin. And these are just some examples. I'm not going to go through all of them. It's just a snapshot of the different kinds of countermeasures that we can apply, and we'll be talking about them again down the road, and sooner rather than later. But the one thing that we had to do is adjust our budget calendar, where I think initially, under normal circumstances, I think we had a plan to maybe have the tentative budget served up in mid-May, start to have the public hearings in early June, and get adoption by your last regular meeting in June. Rock and roll. Ain't happening though. So we've had to adjust. We're going to have to go back with a lot of the departments, whether we're talking about, primarily expenditure countermeasures or any other kinds of revisions. And basically, we've got between now and June 11th to submit a tentative budget to you folks before we enter into the hearings. And we're going to go right down to the wire, probably on June 3rd, the last day of June, to meet legal compliance, to approve some kind of budget. But one thing I want you to remember, and I should have introduced this earlier, because of the way things can change, there is a strong possibility that either on an intermittent month or quarterly, we may have to come back and do budget adjustments, whether they're nice or whether they're ugly. Or not adjustments, amendments. Because if you go back to those charts and graphs and all that stuff, we don't know what to expect. This isn't a normal cyclical recession, but we know we're in one. So I would think that we could have one or two or more if necessary budget discussions before the month of May is closed out in a workshop setting. So I think it's fair to give you some warning about that, because I think we're going to have to make some very difficult decisions. And I think ultimately that's it, and I probably exceeded 20 minutes, and I'm sorry if I did. But I think it was important to throw it out there. And I know we're still looking from about 20 or 30,000 feet, but we got to hit ground zero in a hurry. But these are strange times, and when you're dealing with the unknown, we've got to figure out how to make the best decisions we can with the least possible pain, or if necessary, some additional pain, because it is just mind-boggling to think that within a year, your liquidity comes down to next to nothing. I mean, if it really shot down to $2 million in our fund balance at the end of the year on a $43 million budget, That's not a good fund balance ratio. But anyway, I'm done. If you have any questions or comments, I'll be glad to address them now, or sidebars at another time, or when we meet again. But I apologize for bringing dire news, but I think we have to be honest with you and transparent, and with the public too. But I don't think we're in any different situation than any other local government or public sector agency. And I know that we'll do what we need to do for the good of the citizens. So that's all I have, unless you have anything for me more that you want to ask or comment.
Anyone want to ask him a question or make any comment?
Maybe Commissioner Gibson wants to pass some of the Kleenex around this time.
We'll ask someone to get these muzzles on.
All right.
I might make a comment because, you know, it's tough to sit here, but it's reality to hear. I was wondering if you were going to say anything good, but it's hard to say anything good when it's all bad. But I do want to make a comment, and I've got total confidence. I mean, you know, I'd like to say we're booked, and we're going to bounce back. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we will bounce back. But to everybody sitting out there, if there's anybody watching this, I can just imagine, well, here comes the tax increase, here comes the tax increase. But I would like to say this. This is a dedicated bunch of commissioners here. We're going to tighten our belt. So we're going to have to try to work within our means with no tax increase, at least for a short period of time coming, because public can't stand it, business owners cannot stand a tax increase, the ones that can open back up. So I just hope our department heads and supervisors can understand what tighten your belt means.
Well, I'll tell you what, I would argue that by the end of July, we'd have a lot more data to work with and our crystal ball would be cleaner. But we got to pass the budget by June 30th.
We can do that.
Yes, sir. And again, what I want to emphasize is, as we collect data, as we watch the General Assembly, the state passing their budget, I mean, we're going to take it down to the final hour, and we're going to do everything we can with the information available to make adjustments, whatever they may be. But when you don't have when your data is lagging, and it's not a true reflection of what you're really seeing in the current month, it's difficult to predict. And so I guess the way you could say it is we're erring on the side of vigorous caution.
Well, I would like to make one other statement. Total confidence in the finance department, the county manager, and all those that are involved, that we know that you can do it. And just keep those three words in mind when you are coming up with the budget. Just tighten your belt. So, anyone else have a comment? But we certainly appreciate that conversation and news.
Thank you. I wish it was more optimistic, but we'll keep working on it.
It will get there.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have a little roads discussion, and we may ask Mr. Butler to talk for just a few minutes about the recycle center. When this is, but you have a video to show us about cleaning out culverts.
Yes, sir.
If we could do that, and because I'm going to ask something that we don't have a lengthy discussion on roads tonight, but I would like to call for a workshop on nothing but roads and possibly recycle centers at our next morning meeting, which will be May the 19th, if that would be satisfactory with y'all. And maybe we could get used to breathing and attend these masks by then. But so if you'll go ahead and show the video to us, then
Mr. Chairman, before he starts, can I say something?
yes, sir.
Just bring everybody up to speed. What he's fixing to show y'all is a jello machine that I talked to the chairman and several commissioners. We've got a hard time in the last several years leaving everything to culvert pipes out. because like the inmates wanting to do it, or us being able to make them do it. So this machine, what you're gonna be looking at, is a jello machine, and that's what it's gonna be used for. They can then try the augers and everything else. A cross drain, a regular culvert pipe, which we got 20,000 safe in BOC County. The county side, not state road, just county culvert pipe. They try the auger. The bad thing about the auger is the alignment all on the old pipes and all, just tears the auger up with the operators, and then you got the cross drains that go from one side of the road to the other. In order to run something like that, you got to get on people's personal property to set up, which you run into all kinds of things with that. So the machine y'all gonna be looking at, they'll Blake out and set it up, and he'll be, Dave's got him here to kind of answer some questions if y'all want. They sent one, this demo, the first demo we set. They didn't send a big enough machine, so it didn't work out right. Now this machine here that everybody looks at and everybody oohed and awed at when it drove into town, that's sitting on, I think, a 20-mile Peterbilt truck. That unit there's $400,000. Won't fall out your check. We don't need that unit. They sent that unit just to send the jello off the back of it, that'll furnish the volume and the pressure to do the job. And the nozzle that was built, I think it come out of South Carolina. But anyway, I just wanted to state that before, so everybody will know what they're looking at. So, go ahead.
Okay. The culvert number 1, Andy, and there's a before picture. This is what it looked like beforehand. You can see how clogged up it was, the debris and the dirt in the area there. That was partially, once we had started, that was kind of a mid section there. That's an upper view of it before we started on it. If you can go to the video, Andy, on the first video there. That's the machine in operation, coming in on the low side. And it takes a couple of people to operate it for safety purposes. But you can see how it's pushing that dirt and water back down the ditch away from the drain. Did that one end, Andy? Is that the end of that one? Go to the next one. See guys, blowing it out. It has a lot of force. It can blow the dirt 30, 40 feet back down the ditch out of your way. That's just a visual of what it looks like while it's operating. I don't want to time a lot of time when you're watching it do what it's doing. If you go down to the after picture, that was it. That's the culvert pipe after we went all the way through it. I think that one took us a little bit of time, didn't it, Blake? About 7 minutes or something to clean that particular culvert out, but that was the first one that we had started with. We've got some other ones to look at if you want. There's culvert 2 or 3, whichever, and there's before and after pictures. If you don't, we don't want to. That's the before picture on that. If there's an after above and below, and then an after picture. That's it cleaned out. So the machine works. It has its function. It does a good job. It does it in a reasonable time. It would be a benefit to us. I've said it before in commission meetings. If we don't maintain our drainage and allow our water somewhere to go, our road is what suffers from it. And that's why we've been suffering a lot between our ditches and our culvert pipe blockages. That's what causes the water to go over the road and cause our washouts. We've been chasing them. You know, you've seen it, you've heard it for the last 2-3 months. Our dirt road conditions. We've still got one section of road closed. Just because it got in such bad shape because of water and because of ATVs or 4-wheel drive vehicles getting in there and playing. And there's about a 2-mile stretch of Bowie Riggers Road that is still barricaded off. Now nobody lives there. Might be one to consider abandoned services too, but I don't know how the public would take that. But if we don't maintain our drainage, we struggle maintaining our roads, which we're struggling as it is. With the workforce and everything that's going on right now, we're short-handed. I'm not giving you that as excuses, just fact. we're doing all we can do. We've made a lot of progress since the rains. I think some of you have rode some roads. You've seen the crowns in the dirt roads where we've made our grading passes since the heavy rains. We're working on ditching now. Some of you've seen the areas that have been ditched and that's functioning as it should. So it's a work in progress, and this could definitely be a benefit to our system to help maintain that, help make it easier to maintain the roads. It'll save us money in the long run. We've spent, Kyle, what, $70,000 in the last month on trucks and dirt.
More than 73.
Huh?
More than 73.
Yeah, so we've spent a good bit of money renting trucks, trying to keep trucks running. We're short-handed on staff driving our trucks, so we've had to rent trucks to help keep dirt moving to get these roads repaired. This machine could, if it's used correctly and consistently year-round to try to to get as much progress as we can, it could save us from having to follow up with that much labor on the back end to repair roads in the future. So say that just that's the demo of the machine. Is it a fix-all? There's nothing. It's always a maintenance issue for dirt roads. Anytime you got dirt and water, dirt's going to move. It'll always be a maintenance issue, but it will be a positive support to trying to maintain the roads.
I talked to most of the commissioners. I talked to Mr. Roy today, and Commissioner Stern, talked to Commissioner Gibson. Probably 95% of the calls we get roads, and the ones that ain't roads is the trash. And me and Dave, all of us, we've been through it several times as far as getting back to digging the ditches. Everybody plus when you gonna go back to digging the ditches. Well, they digging the ditches what they can now as far as the traditional ditch. But if you don't clean the culvert pipes out, there really ain't no need digging the ditches. The water ain't got nowhere to go. If you ain't gonna dig the ditches, you don't need to clean the culvert pipes out. That unit, you can mount it. Now that's up in the air where whatever thing them things satisfy them best. If the commissioners want to do this, unless they want to try to find something else, this is kind of the last ditch effort here. It can be mounted on a trailer. It can be mounted on an old fire truck. It can be mounted on an old school bus. It ain't got to be on that truck. All we need is the power unit. But now that machine will work 12 months out of the year. It won't be seasonal. I mean, that thing will clean culvert pipes the day after it gets through raining. If you can't go on the dirt road, county dirt road, you can go on the county paved road. You got crew that really the second man, you're going to have a water man delivering water, and you're going to have somebody running the jug machine. Really the third man, which you're going to have him because that thing will cut your leg off if you don't know how to run it, which Blake Allen's here, that's all he's ever done his whole life is run on. He's the one that introduced Dave Cook show, Dave how to run it. The last man there, he's pretty much there just call. He hit the stop button on it to call 911. That's what you can't. In other words, to take that unit and say, well, we'll take 3 people off of the road crew and we're going to put them on that unit because it ain't raining today. Well, I mean, that thing there could go ever. The only reason it won't be running is because they just can't make somebody run. And I've talked to Dick and I've talked to Kyle, and we both said this. I mean, and of course I know the budget deficit and all that. I know we have to get. And I told Dick and Kyle both. I said, okay, y'all get this equipment now. And both said, if we get the equipment, we can make it happen. I said, okay, well, if you get the equipment and it don't happen, then we know where the weak link's at. And both of them agreed. Because if we get the stuff and we can't make it happen, then y'all know where the weak link's at. So that's what we had. All the commissioners get phone calls about the ditch, the culvert pipes cleaned out. We passed the buck, told everybody, well, we can't get him like later, we can't find it cleaned out. It'll clean it out. So if you want the culvert pipe cleaned out, that'll do it. And Blake, you can get with Blake, he'll give you websites you can go on. They got just video after video that shows you how to do it, and the nozzles and everything. And that nozzle there, they can tell you that fella built that nozzle just for Dinkin to send down here for that them culvert pipes. And that's all he does is build nozzles, and that's all he's ever done. He don't have anything to do with the jelly. He just builds nozzles. You call him and tell him you want one to clean your kitchen sink, he'll build you one and send it to you. So, but other than that, That's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood exactly what that machine was and the different applications of how you can do it. They don't necessarily have to be on that truck. A lot of people see that and just, oh my goodness, I mean, we don't need that. And we don't need that. We don't need the back part of it. We don't need the truck part of it.
Right.
We need the power.
That truck that you've seen a picture of is actually a jetter and a vacuum system. It can clean out sewer lines in the city. It can do a number of things. But so the storm drains or whatever, things that you can't, that aren't reasonably short like this. But with the labor and the machine, we can definitely make some advances. If you're talking about just, if you've done 2 an hour, you get 15 or 20 a day, you know, that's 100 a week. But when you start talking about 10 or 20,000 culverts and cross drains, that's a long-term process. It takes a long time to get around the county. And then heavy rains are going to put silt right back into pipes, and you're going to have to come back and do them again. So it'll be a constant job. It's not a one-time cure-all. It's not a short-term fix. And it's a long-term investment to help ensure the maintenance of the roads.
I guess the perfect application would be if they would run the ditchers.
Right.
And this machine would come, when they get off of that road, this machine would come behind them and go cold pipes that. Like we say, if it's raining, nature has its way. If they clean the cold pipe out, the ditches full of water, they don't need a water truck. All they need, just blow the cold pipe out, and the water will wash it. Once you get the road to it, the water will wash the cold pipe out.
Till you get down there to the flatlands.
That's what we're going to do about that. I mean, Kyle just leaned over here and told me he's the one that's been talking back into the people, and that's his truck mounting. And he just told me truck mounting unit 276, that's truck mounting.
Yeah.
They just mentioned trailer mounting. So the main thing, I guess, to move forward, or not tonight, of course, we're going to have a workshop. We're just trying to introduce the machine.
Yeah, just to show you that there is a plus out there that could benefit.
Because every time somebody asks me, well, will it work? And the printers see that. Well, it wasn't working. They ain't seen it yet, but it works. So now y'all seen it, and we'll go forward from here. If whether you want to do it or not. Now everybody's seen it, they've been introduced to it, and we'll go from there.
There's just a lot of effort put in trying to investigate this and see whether it works and see what the outcome was. And we wanted y'all to see what that effort got us, what kind of condition it could be afterwards, and what benefit it may be to us.
If you would do something, touch on, we all probably have some questions about that, but it does look like it will work, and we need something that will work, and whatever we can find that will work is better than what we have now, which is nothing. And but if you'll touch on our next biggest issue, recycle centers, and I'm sure you can do a real good job in 5 minutes and 53 seconds. So I'm going to take off and go ahead.
Well, blow the whistle on me if I go over. Recycle centers, as Mr. Couch mentioned earlier, the attendants are not there. We're managing the gates at this time with employees, opening them on the way to work, closing them on the way home, whatever. We're making sure that they're open and closed on a daily basis. And the volumes have just increased. People are doing everything from replacing furniture to cleaning up yards or rebuilding the house. I mean, go to Lowe's and see what kind of, they're doing more business than they've ever done with everything that's going on and people doing things around home. And it's just creating a lot, and people being home and all the kids being home and parents having to be home with them to take care of them. And Kyle and Thurman have mentioned to me that the biggest thing they see in the trash containers is paper plates and solo cups. Nobody washing dishes. So it's a big generation of trash, and we're doing what we can to service it. We're trying to come up with new ways to shift trash around and make it easier to use and less haul for us. But it's a chore. We've got issues with employees. We've got employees on light duty. We've got employees using the COVID issue to every other week be off to take care of kids. We've got employees that are off with extended leave now that we don't know what their time frames are because of the emergency leave. And So we've gone from what is 8 drivers on a regular basis, we have 4 drivers today, servicing centers. And, you know, so we're running 50 to 70 hours a week on these guys. And, when we were running 7 and 8, we were running 50 to 70 hours. We got 4 drivers now. They almost need to be running around the clock, to be able to keep up. It's overwhelming for us. We've come up with several ideas, but everything we try to enact seems to take time to get set up, or it creates another issue. We do have some contamination going on because there's nobody there to supervise it. We're in the process of getting the electric gates put in and the cameras put in so that we can view that, maybe catch somebody and make some cases and cut down on the abuse or the misuse. But it's a big job, and anybody, Kyle has said it numerous times, if there was an ideal way to do this, everybody in the state would be doing it the same way. And everybody has their own set of problems with this. And our biggest problem is labor, trucks, and just getting it done in the field. And it's a struggle, especially when we're working with basically half force, trying to accomplish more than what we were 4 months ago. So, any other questions?
I don't have a question. Well, I guess it is a question. Then, do you think that because of the shortage and workers, do you think that word has gotten around to other counties that we are short of workers and don't have that person there to watch over them? And the reason I ask that is because I've been to a couple of them, and I've seen out of town tags, Evans, from Bryan, all of them, I think the word has gotten out to them that we're not monitoring them like we used to because of the shortage. I've been around to a couple of them, and I've seen a whole bunch of stuff put in. I'm surprised I didn't find somebody deceased in one of them. But it's a problem, and I appreciate what y'all are doing. I mean, you're doing the best you can with what you got.
Well, the issue about the abuse is basically because there's probably not an attendant there, but that attendant is not necessarily because of being short-handed on that aspect of the labor. It's more about their safety and not having them in that environment to be interacting with the public and handling trash or picking up other people's trash off the ground or whatever, because we don't know what that virus does as far as living on surfaces. But we are in the process of getting cameras installed, and we can view them from the office. We can hopefully cut down on some travel by determining whether we even need to go service centers by camera. And also, if the drivers notice any problems or misuse, we can view back and see who may have contributed to that, and then possibly get some information for some follow-up prosecution. And maybe if we can get a few cases, maybe we can deter some of that. Some of the contractors have found out, and they're carrying contract materials there. The transfer station out here where they were receiving contract debris and scraps say that theirs has gone to nothing, and we know why, because they're carrying it to our centers. They're misusing the containers. If they pull up there with yard debris and trash, rather than move from one container to another, they throw it all in the same one, which in turn causes us additional problems at the transfer station, because now we can't dump yard waste in our landfill. We've got to run it through the additional tippage fees and dispose of it that way. So it's a number of things that's compounding on us, but the biggest problem is just the mass volume of handling. That's the reason the centers look full all the time. We can pick up a container. Before we can get that container emptied and get it back to the center, the sister container sitting right beside it is full. And it's just, every day is a Saturday and a Sunday now.
Yeah.
Because everybody's home.
See, when it comes to the containers, looks like there's a problem with the larger, taller containers being placed where people are used to the compactors, and it's causing a problem with elderly population, because, I mean, I know it's all the same household and garbage now, but when they're used to pulling up to the compactors, and there's a big
Height of them.
yeah, and then they, you know, instead of having to pull off the asphalt and, you know, walk over to where it's kind of rough, it just seems like we could put those shorter containers there in that place. I mean,
And the main reason that those big ones are there is the shorter ones fill up so fast that we can't keep them serviced. And so we set the 30 yards there, which are a little taller, and it does buy us a little bit more time before we have to haul that container. We've got some ideas about how to rearrange some of these containers. Set 220s, put a larger 30 or a 40 in the middle of them, service them with a grapple truck, keep the smaller ones empty, let the grapple truck run from center to center and just move trash from one container to the other. And then you're only hauling one container away, 140 instead of 220s. And that may help us a little bit in travel time and stuff, but it's a matter of getting the time enough to go move those containers around and get them organized. Because when we drive up in the center and everything's full, how do you organize it without emptying it? And you can't get it empty to get it organized. And it's just, but I understand what you're saying, and we've heard that complaint. We've heard that issue come up numerous times. We have moved the compactors because there was nobody there to run them. We couldn't trust that the citizens could activate them or run them, so we had to move them. But that's the main reason. I mean, if we picked up a 20, the other 20 would be full before we could get back. With the 30s sitting there, they would buy us a little bit more time in between having service. I understand that it is troublesome for some to be able to get it up and over the sides.
If I could add something.
Yeah.
The other two parts to answer that question. Having the 30 sitting on the compactor pads also deters your bad folks that pull in there. It gives us one or two less cans with all kinds of stuff thrown in it. Most anybody can throw over a bag of trash into a 30-yard can. But you're not going to roll up to a 30-yard can and just heave a bunch of tires and rims, so it's kind of a deterrent from keeping every can we have from being contaminated all the time. The other part of that is we flat ran out of 20-yard cans. The cans we have there's no telling how new the newest one is, but we did run out of 20-yard cans in an attempt to put enough in the centers to handle the flow of trash going in and out. We flat run out of cans. We've actually reached a point now where we're probably fixing to start pulling cans from our rental cans just to keep our centers for having a place to dump trash.
We thank y'all for coming tonight and the comments, and then we will resume this discussion on May the 19th, approximately at 9:30 maybe, after our original meeting. So, unless y'all have a burning desire or another question, then we're going to release in the present time just to go sit back down.
Thank y'all.
We're going to move next to staff comments. Do we have anyone from staff that would like to make any kind of comment?
Just a reminder about next Tuesday at 5:30 to hear the zoning cases.
Right. It's a workshop next Tuesday at 5:30. I think it's 4 zoning cases, and it should not be a major issue with any of them. Anyone, other staff members? All right, we'll move to commissioners. Do you have any comments?
I'd just like to say, I appreciate the staff we have. Working with what we got, what we don't have, I'll still say we got the best staff in Georgia. So or argue with somebody who say, it's not true.
Anyone else?
I'd like to say, I'd like to thank Blake Allen took off 2 or 3 days to do a show taking them. I run that machine, and he worked with Dave Cobb and them a bunch, and I just like to thank him for the county, for him helping us.
Any other comments? I too would like to just thank everybody for wearing your mask. It's something, you know, I go to these places and that's one of the first things that I've heard is wear your mask, wear your mask. And social distancing, 6 feet. Wash your face. Wash your hands, don't touch your face. And I wanted to prove something tonight that we could lead by example. And I think 98.9757%. We did have masks worn tonight, and I do appreciate that. And we may not have saved somebody's life, but maybe we have. We just don't know. I'll be glad when this is all over with, so we don't have to wear these masks. And having said that, I do appreciate the employees of Bullock County. And I reiterate one thing I said a while ago, we are Bullock and we will come back with God's blessings. So if there's nothing else, no one else has anything to say, then I'm going to ask for this. I need a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for coming.